Tonight, we are going into a place most people avoid. Not the surface version of pain. Not the version people post about. Not the version people cry about publicly. We are going deeper than that. Because some wounds never bled outwardly. They bled inwardly. And while everybody celebrated your strength, nobody noticed parts of you were disappearing. Some of you did not just survive pain. You became someone else because of it. Life introduced you to a version of yourself that heaven never named, and slowly, without realizing it, you adapted to your wound. You learned how not to feel, how not to trust, how not to hope too much, how not to expect too much, how not to love too deeply. Because trauma has a way of teaching people emotional survival. But survival and healing are not the same thing. And some of you listening tonight have mastered surviving while silently dying inwardly. This is chapter 3. The person pain in trauma renamed you. Pain does not always destroy people loudly. Sometimes it edits them quietly. And the terrifying thing about trauma is that it can become so normal. You forget who you were before it happened. Some of you cannot even remember the last time you felt completely safe emotionally. Pain changed the architecture of your soul. You still smile, still function, still preach, still work, still help others. But inwardly, something shifted years ago. One betrayal made you guarded. One abandonment made you fearful of attachment. One season of disappointment made you stop expecting joy. And little by little, pain started redesigning your personality. Not because that was the real you, but because wounded people learn survival patterns. Some of you became emotionally distant because closeness became associated with pain. Some became hyper-independent because depending on people once broke you. Some became angry because vulnerability started feeling unsafe. Some became silent because your voice was mishandled too many times. And eventually, you started introducing your survival self to the world instead of your authentic self. But hear me tonight. God never intended for trauma to become your identity. Pain was an event, not your name. Trauma was an experience, not your destiny. And some of you have spent years building your entire life around protecting a wound nobody sees. You don't trust easily anymore. You don't rest deeply anymore. You don't open up fully anymore. Not because you were created hard, but because pain taught your nervous system to stay in survival mode. And the enemy loves wounded identity, because wounded people often live beneath their spiritual authority. Why? Because when a person is deeply wounded, they spend more time managing pain than pursuing purpose. The enemy understands this. That's why he attacks identity through experience. He knows repeated pain can slowly train people to believe lies about themselves. Maybe I am hard to love. Maybe I am too broken. Maybe I'll always struggle. Maybe I'll never heal. But tonight, God is confronting every identity your pain built. Because there is a version of you buried underneath survival. The version that trusted freely, the version that dreamed boldly, the version that loved deeply, the version that believed God without fear. And God is calling that person back to the surface, not the defended you, not the emotionally armored you, not the constantly anxious you, the real you, The you heaven spoke before trauma happened. And I hear the Spirit of God saying, you have spent enough years surviving what I called you to overcome. This is the season where God heals you beneath the mask. Not just publicly, internally. Not just behavior, identity. Because some people change their behavior, but never recovered themselves. But tonight, God is restoring the parts of you pain buried alive. I prophesy over every person listening to me right now. The version of you that pain buried is about to breathe again. I don't care how long fear sat on your identity. I don't care how long rejection spoke over your mind. I don't care how many years trauma convinced you to live small. Heaven is calling the real you forward again. I hear the Spirit of God saying, enough hiding, enough shrinking, enough surviving beneath your calling, enough pretending you are okay while silently bleeding inwardly. Because some of you mastered functioning while broken. People celebrated your strength, while heaven saw your exhaustion. People praised your endurance, while God saw the hidden grief you never spoke aloud. But I prophesy tonight, God is healing you beneath the surface. Not just your words, not just your smile, not just your public image. Your soul, I speak to every buried gift. Come alive again.